All right, so hopefully you have your papers from last week, but even if you don't, can I have a couple people sum up kind of some of the things we talked about? You don't have to, I'm gonna have a couple people do this, so you don't have to, don't feel like you have to cover everything, or if you miss something, that's fine. You don't have to summarize all 2 hours, but Hawk, what are some of the things we talked about
All
last
right,
week?
we talked about 4 major sections, and
Okay.
they were who is God, what does God do, who are we, and what should we do?
Right, and what is that? Like, what is, like, when we're asking, like, who is God to, like, what do we do? Like, we say that's the foundation of what? Anybody remember?
The gospel.
The gospel. That's the gospel right there, right? Is that we start with who is God, not who are we, because we're not the center of the story. Now, we think that we're the center of the story because we think it revolves around us, but it actually revolves around God because He's the one who's eternal, not us. So somebody else, what else did we talk about that was key? Yeah.
We also talked about the history in Purdue Chi Alpha.
Yeah. What was that? What were some of your thoughts, like seeing that, like seeing like your spiritual lineage, your spiritual DNA, so to speak?
It was really cool for me because I did grow up here. Like, some of my spiritual mentors were in those photos, and Beth Cox was in the photo from the first Ignite, and she's basically my second mom,
Yeah.
and was a nanny for my family, and is still really close to us. So that was really cool to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of you guys that you go to local churches, RCC or CPC, like there's people that have graduated who've moved on into the marketplace and they're still active in those churches. And it is awesome. You know, it's awesome to see, you know, and and to think, you know, sometimes we do Chi Alpha reunions. We haven't done one in a while, so we're probably due to have one here kind of soon. And it's really fun because people come back from all over the place because this truly is a family. I believe it. Like it's so much more than a ministry. It's so much more. Like we truly become family, and so people come back for it, and it's really exciting to see people and to be like, yes, this is your spiritual great you know, grandchild or whatever. And when you guys come back years from now, hopefully you all come back and visit. You'll be able to see the legacy. We're going to talk a little bit more about that tonight as well. That's exciting. Also Chi Alpha weddings, because a lot of Chi Alpha people meet, you know, so like Harain and Elizabeth will be getting married this summer, and that's just going to be a big fat Chi Alpha reunion. So a bunch of girls that I've discipled I know are coming back for it, and so I always look forward to Chi Alpha weddings because it's a chance for me to see everybody. So somebody else, what's something else important that we talked about last week? Yeah.
We talked about how, well, I guess kind of goes with the history, but like one disciple leads to more disciples, leads to more,
Yeah.
and that discipleship is just pretty much, what was it, like being teachable, hungry, and there's one more, but I can't remember.
Yeah, so an easy way to remember it is fat. We're looking for people who are fat, okay? And all you guys are like, we don't want to be fat, but in this case, this is spiritually fat, so this is a good kind of fat. So what's the F stand for?
Faithful.
A?
Available.
And T?
Teachable.
Very good. So remember, I can teach you anything else you need to know. I don't care if you're the shyest, most quiet person in the world. I don't care if you have never led anything in your life. I don't care if you think you have no clue what you're doing. I can teach you, I promise you. I can do that. But I cannot teach faithfulness, availability, or teachableness. Teachability. I don't know which one's right, but you come in with those things or you don't. But if you're willing to be taught, if you're willing to learn, if you're willing to be faithful, I promise we can work with that. So, all right. So that's good. We'll get into tonight. Yeah. All right. All right, so Jesus' genius method. So how many of you guys would agree that Jesus is probably smarter than you are? Show of hands. Okay, that's most of you guys, so a couple of you guys maybe, you know, think you're smarter than Jesus. But Jesus is smarter than us, right? And so it makes sense, right? As his followers, like we want to do things the way that Jesus does them. Okay, that's pretty easy, pretty standard, self-explanatory, I would say, and yet this is not always what's happening in Christian circles. Does anybody actually know what the name Christian means? You know?
Christ-like.
Yeah, Christ-like. But it's even more specific. That's true, but it's even more specific than that. Yeah.
Isn't it Christ follower?
That's close. but like specifically like that IAN, like what that means. It means little Christ, right? So does anybody look just like their mom or their dad? Anybody? So Lauren, you look just like who?
My mom.
You look just like your mom, okay? And so there might be people who knew your mom when she was young that like when they see you, they're like, what's your mom's name?
Arlena.
And they're like, man, you look just like Arlena, like you're just like a little Arlena, right? Have you ever had anybody say something similar to that? All the time you have somebody say that, okay? And it's because you have her DNA, right? Like, and so no matter what she could have thought, man, I want my daughter to look like this or have this, this physical feature or whatever, but she didn't have a choice in the matter because she simply reproduced who she was. And that's what we do as disciples. We reproduce. You actually don't reproduce what you say you believe, you reproduce who you are. And so if you want your disciples to pray, then you have to pray. If you want your disciples to go out and to share with the lost, like you got to go out and share with the lost. I wasn't planning to talk about any of that tonight, so that's just for free. So, but anyway, that's the same thing, and it starts with Jesus. It starts with His DNA. Like as we spend time with Him and we get His DNA in us, we're actually little Christ. Like we're meant to look just like Him. We're meant for people to look at us just like when people look at Lauren and they say, "You look like," I already forgot her name.
Arlena.
You look just like Arlena. Like in the same way, people should be like, "Lauren, you look just like Jesus." And that's what it's meant to be. So that's what we're gonna talk about tonight. So Jesus lived for one mission. That's your first blank here. Jesus lived for one mission: to restore lost humanity back into relationship with Him. Okay, everything Jesus did was for that mission. Okay, Jesus says in Luke, He says that He came to seek and to save the lost. It's really cool if you go through the New Testament and you look through why Jesus, like there's several times. I always thought it'd be cool to do like a sermon series on every time Jesus says, "This is why I came," and He says a few different things, but it's ultimately the same thing. So like at one point He says, "This is why I came, to testify to the truth." And so everything, every time Jesus said, "This is why He came," this is why He was born as a baby into a human body. Everything He did was to restore lost humanity back into relationship with Him. And it's important to realize this was the plan from the beginning. Jesus was not a backup plan, okay? In Revelation it tells us the Lamb of God was slain since the foundation of the world. And so from the very beginning, from when God first created humanity, He knew man's propensity to sin. He knew what was going to happen. And in fact, you see in Genesis, you see the very first prophecy of Jesus. Now, it doesn't say the name Jesus, but it says that's when you have the serpent and you have Eve, it says that the serpent will strike her heel, and then it says that she will crush his head. And that's a prophecy of the fact that Jesus is going to die on the cross, and Satan thinks he's won. And then 3 days later, Jesus rises again and crushes the enemy, crushes Satan, crushes sin, crushes death. In one blow. So everything that Jesus did, everything He did was for this one mission. Nothing was haphazard or random. There was no wasted energy, not an idle world. He lived, He died, He rose again according to schedule. He calculated every move and conceived a plan that would not fail. So there's something that we do as staff called Jesus Retreats. And so one of the requirements on staff is that every semester you take a 48-hour Jesus retreat. And so isn't that cool that that's like part of our job? Like how many employers are like, "I want you to go spend some time with Jesus for 48 hours. And so people do that different ways. But the idea is that we try to turn off our devices and just get alone with God. And we encourage some of our life group leaders to do it this year and to try it over Christmas break. But one year, it was a couple years ago, I was on one of my Jesus retreats, and I was reading in the Word, and I kept seeing something that I felt like God was really highlighting to me. And Jesus was over and over again saying, "I only do what I see the Father doing." He said, "I only say what the Father tells me to say." And I thought, man, I do not live like that. I think something and I'm saying it, right? I want to do something and I do it. I'm like, what if I lived in such a way that I only did what God was asking me to do? Okay? How many of you guys have felt stressed out at some point this year? Raise your hand. And my hand's up. I have too. Do you think that God has means for you to live a stressed out life? Do you think He created you for that? Nope. So do you think that there's a better chance that we are doing something that God has not actually asked us to do? It's probably more the case. And so if we are doing only what the Father is asking us to do, and we're only saying what He's asking us to say, like, we're going to live the life that He promised in John 10, which is life to the full. Now, I'm not saying that means life will always be easy, but I think that, the stress and those things that we feel like, it's because we're not living like Jesus lived. And that's, that's what He did. And then there's no distinction between sacred and secular. Discipleship is all of life. And so when we're saying we're only going to do and say what the Father is asking us to do and say, there's one thing that we know for sure that we're meant to do, and that's to make disciples. God is clear in His Word over and over and over again. We are to make disciples. It's what Jesus did. It's the last thing He commanded His people to do. We see in Acts the result of discipleship. You see in from Paul to Timothy and other people in the New Testament, you see them making disciples, and you see the results of that. And it's all of life. It's not just meant to be just a one-time reading. We're going to get into that a little bit later. So here's the next question. Do you live on kingdom mission just like Jesus? So you guys are little Christ, right? Bunch of little Christ running around. And so if Jesus, I think it was during the discipleship dessert, which probably most of you guys were at, but I think it was there. I said something to the effect of being a disciple is being who Jesus would be if He were you. And so if Jesus was living your life, and He had your major, and He had your life circumstances, and He was here as a student at Purdue, what would He do? Okay, how would He live? That's how you're meant to live. That's what you're meant to do. Well, we know He would make disciples, right? We know He would engage the lost. We know that He would be on mission. And so here's the question: are you on mission for Jesus? Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. I talked about this, some of these things during one of maybe the generosity message, but talking about this very truth. And so there's some different things here. Time. Okay. So I had last week I asked you guys that if how many of you guys were debated whether or not to do the LTC because of time, and literally pretty much all hands went up yeah, I'm not sure. But your time, at least now, and maybe even after college, but for sure now, your time is one of the greatest. It's one of your greatest assets. It's one of your greatest things that you have to offer God. And so, is your time? Does your time belong to you, or does it belong to God? Have you submitted your schedule to Jesus, or do you just say I'm going to do this and this and this because this is what I feel like doing, or have you said God, this is my schedule. Something else we do as staff is we make a calendar each week, because what happens is if you don't organize your life, you don't organize your schedule, then it's something similar to if you've ever heard of Dave Ramsey. He's like the big money guru, and he's does Financial Peace University, and he's really about making a financial budget. And so something he says all the time is, if you don't tell your money where to go, it will tell you where to go. And the same is true for your time. But there's a huge difference between time and money. You can always make more money, but you don't get any more time. Every second we had, even all the time, this time that we've been here in LTC, all that time is gone. And then it's this second, that second, you can't get more time. We all have the same amount of time in your day. And so does your time honor God? And so we make our schedule because we want to make sure that we're practicing rest. We want to make sure that we're not just working all the time, but we also want to make sure that we have time for, a lot of times when people say, I was talking to this with, so I had discipleship this last week with Marquetta and Alameda, a couple awesome grad students who are discipling you ladies, and so we were talking about this, and Alameda was yeah, it's it's not that people don't have time, it's just like, what's most important to you? And I was like, man, that's it right there, because you make time for what's important to you. And so people always seem like they have time to like watch Netflix or like hang out with their friends or do, and me too, and I'm not like bashing any of those things. But what I'm saying is that the only way we're spending our time? And like, we are meant to rest, like you're meant to like, we were having a big conversation about rest and Sabbath with our interns. Plug for the Chi Alpha internship after you all graduate, please all do it and stay here and go through the internship, you love it. But we were talking about rest and like what that looks like and how we were meant to rest, and how like even in our rest, like in our work we glorify God, in our rest we also glorify God. And so, are we, does our time belong to Him? Are we investing our time into developing intimacy with Christ? Do you invest time into fellowshipping with God's people? Community is really important, and I know sometimes that's difficult, especially at a school like Purdue. Chi Alpha is all about community, and Chi Alpha really thrives on party school campuses. So, you go to IU or somewhere like that, and they have a huge Chi Alpha, or other, like the biggest Chi Alphas in this country, they're on campuses where people are there to they're getting their degree, but they're also there to have a good time. So it's like, they're gonna party anyway, and so it's really easy for people to invite them in, like, hey, come to this Chi Alpha party. And they throw those parties all the time. We come to Purdue and we're like, hey, we're gonna have this party, and people are like, I gotta study, and they're serious. Like, we're like Friday night Ignite, and they're like, I have to study, and they're serious. And I was like, when I first got here, I was like, I thought people were lying to me, like, you don't have to study. No, they really are studying. Like, you guys really do study that much. Like, it's crazy. And so, but it's important to invest time into fellowshipping with God's people. And again, we want you to study, we want you to graduate. Please all graduate, because otherwise you'll have to drop out and you won't be able to be, here anymore. So we do want you to graduate, we want you to be successful, but that's important. Do you invest your time and your energy into sharing the gospel and making disciples? And so I challenge you tonight to look, and as I go over these things, I want you to really honestly evaluate and say, which of these do I need to work on? Money. Does your money belong to you or to God? Do you invest your finances into bringing the gospel to those who have not heard? We encourage everybody to give to a missionary. We have several missionaries that we support as a Chi Alpha group. And so the money that you guys give in your tithes towards Chi Alpha, some of that money goes to missions, but we also encourage you guys to pick up a missionary yourself. We did a missions week for the first time this year. We had missionaries that are going to Tajikistan, to India, to Lithuania, 3 parts of the world that need the gospel, and there are missionaries that are willing to go, like boots on the ground, and be there and to reach out to people that maybe haven't heard of Jesus. And so, where is your money going? Relationships. Are all your relationships ordered of the Lord? Are there any relationships that are more important to you than your relationship with Jesus? This is that divided heart thing, and so it's not a sin, to have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. We we had lots of conversations, at least at the girls' house. We talked about that. I don't know what you boys talked about, but we talked about this when we did the purity thing, right? And so it's not a sin, but what's more important to you? Because Jesus always has to be first in your life, Same thing with friendships. I hope you guys have close friendships. I hope you're developing friendships within Chi Alpha, but Jesus has to be first. And are you investing in at least one disciple to build the kingdom? And that's what we ask of our life group leaders, and as you guys go through this class and you apply to be life group leaders, that's what we ask is would you commit to making at least one disciple while you're here? Maybe 2, but if you at least make 1, then you've replaced yourself after you graduate. If you've made 2, now after you graduate, you've replaced yourself and you've built the kingdom. And so we encourage that. And do you regularly invest in those who do not know Jesus? You can begin to have discipleship relationships now, even before you become an official life group leader. There might be other new people, that by now, I hope, and this is what I challenged you guys with last week, I hope that by now, your life group leader isn't doing all the work in your group. I hope that you are on mission with your life group leader saying, hey, who can we reach out to? And when new people come to the group, new people come to your Bible study, or new people come to hang out, I hope it's not just your life group leader going up and saying, hey, you know, you guys can start that now. You don't have to have a title to love people who don't know Jesus or people who do know Jesus. Like, you can begin to love them now, reach out to them now, like, and be a blessing to your life group leader in that way. And then future plans and dreams. Future plans and dreams, and I think this is a big one for college students because you guys come here with something particular in mind. You have a dream in mind. You have a goal in mind. Your parents probably have a dream in mind for you. They have a goal in mind for you. But does your future, do your plans, do your dreams belong to you or God? If God was to tell you today, I want you to change your major to this. If God was to tell you today, I want you to pursue this after graduation, would you do it? If the answer is no, then you have something that you have raised above God. Your degree, your future. And I'm not saying that most of you guys, God's probably not going to ever tell that, and like you're going to continue on with what you're doing, but it's important that everything in this life that we hold with an open hand. And we say, God, it's all yours. Like every dream, every plan, all that I have. Do you make plans in according with how God can best use your life to build his kingdom? Or are you more concerned with getting what you want? And we have students who are seniors right now, and they're going through this. You know, they've gotten their degree, and they always thought, I know Jacob. Some of you guys know Jacob. He's a resource leader for some of you guys, and he thought, he was a chemical engineer major, and he thought, he was going to go be a chemical engineer, make a lot of money, and shortly before he graduated, he felt like God said, no, I want you to stay at Purdue another year to do the CMIT, and he was like, man, like that's tough, but he prayed and felt like God was confirming that, and he's doing that, and God is teaching him so much through that, and I'm so proud of him for holding that with an open hand, and I believe that he'll still go into the marketplace someday, and it'll be great, but for now, like he's living out the call of God on his life, which is really awesome. So I want to take a minute and have you guys get into groups of 3 or so. There might be groups of 2 or whatever, but maybe around 3, 2 or 3, and ask each other of these time, money, relationships, and future plans and dreams, which one do you, because usually there's one automatically that as you look at those, you're like, yep, that's me. Like I know that I don't give God my time or my schedule, or I know that my future plans and dreams, whatever it is. And so I want you guys to just have a discussion with each other and just for a few minutes, and then we'll come back together. So go ahead and break into groups and discuss. Yeah, it's because it's tough. Yeah, that's where I went back to see it.
That is stuff I thought out. And this happened. I was born again.
Not when I receive the
that's what I remember. Music and like podcasts. Like today, it was really funny. I was listening to my playlist. I usually talk to over 5,000 hours of songs. Just because I really had found everything that I was like, and I shot a ball and all that. So I was and whatever. And today I was listening to like different music rather than close like yeah, like
All right, did everybody have a chance to share? All right, so don't despair if there's one or if there's more of these that you struggle with. I don't know that I've ever met a Purdue student that didn't struggle with time management to some degree. We talk about it at most retreats. Sometimes we talk about it at Ignite because you guys are all like overachievers, go-getters, you know, type of personality. And so it's something that comes up a lot. But again, this is the beauty of discipleship because you have, you know, I can't help 100 of you with time management, you know, that are in Chi Alpha, but your discipler can. And I've walked tons of disciples through time management, their calendars. I'm amazed. I've discipled several students, grad students here who are PhD students. I mean, PhD students who are brilliant, and I'm not talking about Merced and Alameda because like they're pretty good with their time, but like other students in the past that like, I think you got a PhD and like they have no, I was like, man, I guess, but they still don't necessarily teach you how to manage time. I'm like, I don't understand how you got this degree and like you have no grasp on how to do your calendar, but I've walked them through it. Your discipler can help you with that. Even as you go into like being a life group leader, like there will be more demands of your time as a life group leader. We try to not make it like crazy demands. You know, most of the requirements of being a life group leader are things that you're already doing. Coming to Ignite, going to Bible study, you know, which is why we look for faithfulness, you know, first because it's mostly things you're already doing. But there still are some more demands, and so that's why we talk about time management. And so whatever one of these that you might struggle with, you know, we're here to help you. The next thing we're going to talk about is bigger always better? Is bigger always better? So we associate large numbers with success, even in the church. So wherever I go to churches to talk about Chi Alpha, especially maybe people who don't know much about Chi Alpha, and I say, yeah, I'm you know, at Purdue Chi Alpha right now, and you know, yeah, God's doing some great things. Anybody have an idea? Usually, almost always the first, if not the first, then for sure the second question that people always ask me. How big is it? How many people go there, right? Because they think that number, and it's just what we're trained, you know, is like the more numbers you have, the bigger it is, the better it is how we're trained a lot of times. There's nothing wrong with a large church, but growth does not necessarily indicate health. I remember when I was a college pastor at a church, I had this guy in the church tell me, because our college group was growing and really great things really were happening, but he told me, he was like, oh, healthy things grow. And that's true, but I started to think about it, even cancer grows, okay? And so that's really what cancer is. It's cells that are reproducing in a really unhealthy, bad way, right? And like that, you wouldn't look at that and say, wow, that's really great, that's really healthy. And so we we want to grow for sure because we see this as like a spiritual army, Mario, are you in the Army or is it the Air Force? What are you in?
Air Force.
Air Force, okay. It's not the same thing, I know, people get really upset about that, so. But it's like a military kind of a thing, right? And so you're like this, and this is what this is like a spiritual, like, army, it's a spiritual, and so the more people we have, the more people that we have to go onto this campus and to take ground for Jesus, right? And so we want to grow, that's important. But we want to make sure we're doing it the right way. We want to make sure we're doing it in a healthy way. And so we're not against large numbers. There are really huge Chi Alphas that have, hundreds and hundreds of people in them. The largest Chi Alpha is in Texas, and I don't know, maybe I don't think they're quite at 1,000, but they're pretty close, maybe 800, something like that. They're a large group, and they're also, I think somebody told me recently that the average Chi Alpha was like 40. I think, and so there's Chi Alphas of all different sizes, all different shapes. They're all wonderful, but this is not always, and the same thing with churches. There's huge churches and small churches, and numbers are one way that you can measure for sure, but certainly not the only way. And I would argue maybe not even the most important way. Something that you'll hear probably us say a lot is it's better to be a mile deep and an inch wide than a mile wide and an inch deep. And so we didn't used to do this LTC class. In fact, you were the second class ever to go through the LTC. So this is like brand new. But it's important because we want to make sure that we get healthy discipleship. And because we did the class, last year, like I said, we started with I think around 24 people or something, and we ended up with 12 who said, yeah, I want to do this, I want to make disciples. And I hope, each year that we do this, I think we have 29 this year, and you always have some that drop out, but I hope that most of you don't. I hope that most of you stay with this, and after you count the cost, say, yeah, I want to do this, I want to make disciples. And because of that, because we started the LTC, it shrunk our leadership numbers a little bit, and I'm okay with that. Really felt like God was taking us through a pruning time, and we were getting a little bit smaller, but He was doing that so we could be stronger. And so that, and that's why God prunes. He prunes our lives sometimes so that we can be even more fruitful, is what the Bible says. And so that's what we want right now, is we're seeing ourselves pruned so that after this year, as we continue to do the LTC, I'm excited for the next couple years. The people who are discipling you right now, at least the sophomores who are discipling you, they went through the LTC, and in 2 years, when they're all seniors, every one of our classes will have been through the LTC. And I think when we get to that point, I think we're going to see just some crazy growth, because we're going to have, from freshmen to, from sophomores to seniors, we're going to have groups of students who really get it, who really understand it, who want to be on mission. All right, so is discipling the best way to reach the world? I taught about this at the discipleship dessert, but this is really important. And I think this is something that is important for us to repeat over and over and over again. So we have the super evangelist, okay? So the super evangelist is so super that he or she is reaching 1,000 people. So this person gets up, preaches, like at an Ignite or a church, whatever, some kind of rally, and 1,000 people come to know Jesus in that day. Now, how many of you guys know you'd be like, wow. How many of you would love to preach a sermon and see 1,000 people come to know Jesus, right? Peter did it in Acts, right? He preaches and it says 3,000 were added to the church. I'm like, man, I get the notes for that sermon, because that's awesome. That's some Holy Spirit preaching right there. That's great. And so you'd say, this is incredible. Not only that, but this evangelist does this same thing the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And after a whole year, 365,000 people are following Jesus. Man, we would all aspire to have that kind of a ministry for sure. Okay? And so the question is, what happens after 10 years of this? And how many years to reach Purdue? Purdue is 40,000, the size of my hometown. When I tell people that, they're so shocked, because my whole town is 40,000. And that's how big Purdue is. So how many years would it take to reach Purdue? Now, Purdue's a little bit different because we're not static. People are constantly graduating, but You get the idea. Okay? And how many years to reach the world population? Okay, there's 7 billion people in the world, and you think, how can our little tiny group reach a world of 7 billion people? Like, it just seems impossible. Okay? Now, we're going to compare this to our faithful disciple maker, okay? And so, somebody who wants to be my faithful disciple maker? Okay, Ashley's going to be my faithful disciple maker, okay? And Ashley's like, yes, I want to make disciples, I get it, it's important, I'm in. And so she lives incarnationally among the lost. And her first year, we send her out next year to make disciples. And she makes 2 disciples, okay? She brings 2 people to Jesus to disciple them. It's awesome. And then the next year, those disciples both make disciples, and they make disciples each year. Okay, so does that make sense? So let's do this. Okay, then this is gonna stretch me with names here. Okay, so Ashley. So the first year, Ashley, she is going to disciple Emily and Abigail. Okay, got 2 names down. All right. And so the first year she disciples the 2 of them. Okay, and then the next year, all 3 of them are like, we're going to go out and we're going to make disciples. Okay, and so then the next year Ashley disciples Audrey and Alexis. That's right, names. Okay, and then Abigail is going to disciple. Oh my goodness! Don't tell me. What's it start with? Emma. Emma. Okay, so Abigail is going to disciple Emma and Sydney. Yes. Sydney. Emma and Sydney. Okay, and then who did I have in here? Emily is going to disciple Vipata and Sneha. Okay, and and then the next year, okay, this whole row is going to disciple 2, and that's like pretty much the rest of you. Okay, so that's what we're talking about here. So again, what would happen in 10 years? How long to reach Purdue? And how many years to reach the world population? Okay, so the super evangelist, the first year, 365,000. Okay, and every year you're adding 365,000. So by year 5, the super evangelist has reached 1,825,000 people. Not too shabby, right? I mean, again, if in 5 years you've won 1 million people to Jesus, you'd be feeling pretty good about yourself. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to say that that's a bad thing. Okay. Poor little Ashley over here. The first year has made 3 disciples. Okay. And by year 2, we've reached 9, right? That's the math that we did, right? It was like 9 people right here. By year 3, 27, and so forth. And by year 5, 243 people. Again, awesome. I mean, I think if we would say within 5 years we had influence over 243 people knowing Jesus, we'd be pretty excited about that. But still is getting trounced here by the super evangelist. All right? But look what happens as we keep going. We get to year 10. That was one of our questions, is what happens in year 10. In year 10, we have 3 million over here. Because what's happening is the super evangelist method is addition. Okay? So every year there's addition, adding. But the faithful discipler is doing what we call multiplication. And that's what Jesus asked us to do, is to multiply. And so they're multiplying by year 10. We're at 59,049. Okay? Anybody want to take a guess? Some of you guys might remember from Discipleship Dessert, but anybody want to take a guess how long it would take to reach Purdue and how long it would take to reach the world? Let's go for Purdue first. How long before it would take 40,000? Some of you guys, I see you're doing the math in your head. Stop it. You guys that's crazy. You're trying to, I hate math. But how long do you think it take to reach Purdue? Doing this. The faith disciple method. Because the super evangelist has already reached Purdue, right? Thoughts? What do you think?
9.5 years.
9.5 years? Oh, yeah, we're sorry, we've already done year 10. Okay, my bad. How long to reach the world? 7 billion people.
Oh.
What do you guys think? How long to reach 7 billion people doing the discipler method? 20?
Plus 10, right?
Well, including that, yeah, like year 10,
Okay,
so.
I think 16.
16? All right, well, let's see. Okay? So, as we keep going, so again, the super evangelist method, it continues to go. Year 20, 7 million, 7.3 million, year 21, 7.6 million. But look here at the faithful disciple method between year 20 and year 21, how it grows from 3 billion to 10 billion in 1 year. Because you have all of those people are discipling 2 people, okay? So the other thing that's really important about this is like, if I said, in order to do this method here on the left, yeah, you might reach Purdue a little bit faster, but how many of you guys would be completely overwhelmed at the notion of trying to reach 1,000 people every single day for an entire year, and then to do that for 20 years? Is that a little overwhelming? And pretty much impossible, right? But if I said, from now until the time you graduate, I want you to make 2 disciples every year at Purdue. How many of you guys know that that's actually attainable? You could actually do that. You could reach 2 people a year. Now, we're hoping to train you guys to be disciple makers wherever you go. We want you to make disciples in the marketplace. You know, there was a girl that was at Purdue a few years ago and graduated. She was graduated from the vet school, and she moved down to Alabama, and she moved into a certain neighborhood because she felt like this is the neighborhood that God asked her to move into. And so she's working for the USDA down there, and but she's in this neighborhood, and there was this older lady in the neighborhood that was kind of like the mom or like the grandma of the neighborhood. And she said she was like, I knew that like this was the woman that if I could like get her like on fire for Jesus, she would infect the entire neighborhood. And so she built a relationship with her, and she began to disciple her, and it's having this ripple effect amongst this entire neighborhood because she's discipling one person. So people leave here and we want them to be disciple makers for the rest of your lives. But I'm saying, even if just while you're at Purdue, if you would make 2 disciples, you know, your next year, you know, for the freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, if you make 2 disciples a year, grad students, depends on how long you're here, you know, 2 to 6 years, whatever, but if you would make disciples, 2 a year, not only could we see Purdue won for Jesus, even with people graduating, we actually, just from our little group, we could see the whole world come to Jesus. And certainly we're not the only group making disciples. There's lots of groups making disciples. So if we join our efforts with all the other churches and campus ministries and other disciple-making movements around the world, it's doable. It's possible if we would all commit to doing this. So this is what Jesus did, right? Jesus made some disciples, and yeah, he preached sermons. Yeah, he did some other things, but the crux and the core of what he did, at least, especially during the years that we see, not only did he make disciples, but he did it really a short amount of time. We only really see 3 years of his public ministry recorded. And during that time, he mostly made disciples. So there's this letter here. This is from a human resources specialist to Jesus, son of Joseph Woodcrafter, Carpenter Shop, Nazareth, from Jordan Personnel Management Consultants. So could I have somebody read this letter from this kind of funny letter to Jesus? Yeah, go ahead. Real loud.
Dear sir, thank you for submitting the resumes of the 12 men you have picked for management positions in your new organization. All of them have taken our battery of tests. We have not only run the results through our computer, but have also arranged personal interviews for each of them with our expert psychologist and vocational aptitude consultant. The profiles of all tests are included, and you will want to study each of them carefully. As part of our service and for your guidance, we make some general comments, much as an auditor will include some general statements. This is given as a result of staff consultations and comes without any additional fee. It is our staff's opinion that most of your nominees are lacking in background education and vocational aptitude for the type of enterprise you are undertaking. They do not have the modern team concept. We would recommend that you continue your search for persons of experience with managerial ability and a proven track record. Simon Peter.
It's almost done.
Okay. Simon Peter is emotionally unstable and given to fits of violent temper. Andrew has absolutely no qualities of leadership. The two brothers, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, place personal interest above company loyalty. Thomas demonstrates a questioning attitude that would tend to undermine others' morale. We feel it is our duty to tell you that Matthew has been blacklisted by the Greater Jerusalem Better Business Guru. James, the son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus definitely have radical tendencies, and they both registered a high score on the maniac depressive profile. One of the candidates, however, shows great potential. He is a man of broad ability and resourcefulness, meets people well, has a keen business mind, and has contacts in high places. He is highly motivated, ambitious, and responsible. We recommend Judas Iscariot as your controller and right-hand man. All of the other profiles are self-explanatory. We wish you every success in your new venture. Sincerely, Human Resources Specialist.
So if you think about it, of the 12 people that Jesus picked, Judas was really the only one that had any sort of, that's why they picked him to be in charge of the money, because he was like the only one that like maybe could help them. The others were fishermen. What did they know about discipleship or ministry? And a lot of times this is what we think. We think, okay, the pastor's up there and it's their job to preach a message that will make my friends come to Jesus. It's their job to preach a message that will we're going to all learn from that and then we're going to all go home. Because you're thinking, you guys are majoring in things like engineering. You guys are majoring in things like business. You guys are majoring in chemistry or, whatever it might be. And you're not, and so you might think, I have no experience. I'm not a pastor. I don't have any theology training. Neither did these guys. And in fact, there was a lot of reasons in the natural to not pick them. Peter's chopping people's ears off. Crazy things are happening. You got the two disciples that are arguing, I'm going to be next to Jesus. Now I'm going to sit next to Jesus. They're like a couple of 5-year-olds, fighting over who gets the front seat of the car, right? They're ridiculous. And they say ridiculous things. They do ridiculous things. Jesus is constantly, I asked the interns this the other day. I'll ask you guys I mentioned a couple. Can you guys think of other ways that the disciples failed? Other ways that they totally would you would say, man, they just did not make the cut?
Well, for one, most of them were really, really young.
Yeah.
They were literally children. That's what Jesus
Yeah.
called them.
So super young. Yeah. Other things that would disqualify them or things that they did that you yep, they're failures. They're not up to stuff. Yeah.
Even though Jesus proved himself, they still doubted him, during the storms on the boat.
They doubted all that. How many times was Jesus you have no faith? Constantly. He was if you would just believe, right? He's raising men from the dead. And they're yeah, I'm not sure, so super, super doubtful. Anything else? Yeah.
Peter completely denied that he knew Jesus.
Yeah, 3 times, right? And Jesus is you're going to deny me. Jesus is I'll go with you to the ends of the earth. And then this little girl, he's yeah, I don't know that guy, and totally. So yeah, absolutely denial. They all abandoned Jesus, right? Except for John, the rest of them hightail out of there when the guards come. Anything else you guys can think of? Yeah.
They will sometimes get in the way of what.
All the time, right? Peter's I have a better idea, Jesus. Rather than go to the cross, why don't you set up your earthly kingdom here, and we could all be rulers? And Jesus has to be get behind me, Satan, because you're, So constantly, yeah. Peter alone, he's putting his foot in his mouth. He's doing all kinds of things. And so these are not people that had training. These are not people, you guys hit a lot of the big ones for sure. And so a lot of times we think that ministry or discipleship or something like that is for the experts, or maybe you've disqualified yourself in some way because you think I've had doubt, okay? We literally call Thomas Doubting Thomas, right? And he was a disciple. Maybe you thought I haven't, I've abandoned Jesus, or I haven't lived my life, the way that I should, you've disqualified yourself in some way. Discipleship is not for experts, it's for the everyday person. It's for the everyday Purdue student going to class. You guys actually can be better disciple makers than I can be, because you guys can go to class, You can live in the dorms. You can do all these things that they're not going to let this old lady do, right? Because if I go and try to like live in the dorms, I'm like, what are you doing? You know, they're not going to let me do that. But you guys can live amongst the lost every day. Has anybody read the book Wiki Church by chance?
What?
Wiki Church. It's a great book. We have it in our library. Plug for the Chi Alpha Library. Our office is in the basement of the Union. If you've never been to our office, you should just come by just to see it. So the staff were off on Monday, so we won't be there, but Tuesdays we're there for our staff meeting. You can come by and say hi to us. It's the stairs by Starbucks. A lot of times if you don't know to look for them, you wouldn't even see it's there, but our office is there. We've got a big sign on the door. So before Wikipedia, did you guys know there was something before Wikipedia? You know that? It was called Newpedia, okay? And the way Newpedia worked is that, so Wikipedia is like, pretty much anybody can like submit an article and then it's like edited by experts and like that kind of a thing, right? So the way this worked was only the experts were allowed to create articles, okay? In 3 years, anybody want to take a guess how many articles they created in 3 years? What, 0? No, they created a few more than that, yeah. 300? Okay, it's somewhere between 0 and 300. Huh? 150? In 3 years, they created 24 articles. In 3 years! The experts, okay? Once they changed it to Wikipedia and they let the average people do it, how many articles do you want to guess that they made in just 1 year? 2,400? Is that what you said? Millions? Not in 1 year. There's millions on there now, but in 1 year, the average people created 20,000 articles. And today, there's over 17 million articles have been submitted. Okay? And so, that's what this is about, okay? Do you know that somebody can start following Jesus one day, and they can start making disciples the next? Okay? All you have to do is be one chapter ahead, one page ahead, one step ahead, you know? Because when you're leading somebody in discipleship, you're basically just saying, follow me as I follow Jesus, right? And so you take a step and you're like, okay, now you take this step, okay? And that's all it is. And so you can, you know, that's basically what the man who was born blind, you know, Jesus healed him. It's in John 8 or John 9. So he's born blind, Jesus heals him. And they drag him in front of the Sanhedrin, these super religious people that have all the answers and know all this stuff. And this guy knows nothing. Like, they're asking him, who's Jesus? They're asking him all these theological questions. And the guy's like, I don't know. I don't even know who Jesus is. Like, he knows nothing. And he stands before them and he gives, like, one of the greatest statements, I think, in the entire Bible. He says, all I know is one thing. I was blind and now I see. That was his testimony. Like, that's all he knew, okay? And so if you've gotten saved one day and that's all you know, like, you can begin. In fact, people who are just like brand new Christians sometimes are the best at winning the lost because they're like, it's so fresh in their mind. Those of us who walk with Jesus for a long time, sometimes it just gets mundane and we forget that excitement of beginning to follow Jesus. And so discipleship is not just for the experts. It's not just for pastors. It's not just for those who have graduated with a theology degree. Like, you don't have to know any of that to make disciples. You know, and the way that we structure our Chi Alpha group the way we do for a reason, because we understand that we have life group leaders who don't know all the answers. But you know what? That's why we have staff and mature students who are resource leaders, and that's why they resource our life group leaders, because they're able to help them when they have questions or they don't, what do I do in this situation? Our resource leaders are there to help them. And so if you think about the life group leaders as parents, a lot of people are, we were talking about this with the interns too. I said, I've never met a parent who had a child and said, from day one, I knew exactly what to do. Go home tonight, ask your parents, okay? Text them tonight and say, when I was born, or like whoever the oldest sibling was, when so-and-so was born, like, did you know exactly what to do? Did you have all the answers? They're gonna laugh in your face. They're gonna be like, I didn't know anything. Like, Zach was telling me, like, before Shiloh, he has a little son named Shiloh, if you didn't know, he said before Shiloh was born, he said he had never changed a diaper in his whole life. And his whole life he had never done that. He didn't know what he was doing. He was like, I don't know how to change diapers, but now I'm sure you're an expert diaper changer, right? Yep. So, and so that's the thing, is like sometimes the way you learn something is just by doing it, you know. But what happens is, you know, as a parent, sometimes when you don't know what to do, you turn to your parent, right? And so the best disciples have not just good parents, but they have really good grandparents. And that's what our resource leaders are like. So you can call all your resource leaders, you can call them Grandma Katie or Grandma Suzanne or Grandpa Jacob, you know, because that's who they are, right? They're the good grandparents. They're helping the people who are discipling. They're going to all love me. Good, I told you to say that. So. All right.
Did we skip this section?
Yeah, I don't know if it's not on here. If they got out of order. Okay, well, if it's up there, I don't know where it is. Okay, so we'll go to section 4 here. Before Jesus ever preached his first sermon, he had already chosen his 12. Jesus wasn't interested in developing programs that would reach the multitudes, but in developing disciples that the multitudes would follow. When Jesus died, he didn't leave a megachurch. He left disciples. He left the kingdom of God in the hands of ordinary men and women who would carry on with his mission, right? Jesus invested in a few in order to reach the masses. I think what happened is, did this get stapled out of order? Is that what happened? I didn't do these papers, and that's why I didn't look them over, which I'm realizing was a mistake.
It's labeled 4, so
Huh?
it's labeled 4 and it comes before 5, so.
Yeah, but then it goes to B. Okay, I see. Okay, no, it's right. I didn't see the A after Jesus' disciples. That's why I was confused. Okay, and then Jesus' disciples were not qualified people. Rowdy, insensitive, quarreling, envious, bigoted. They came from common backgrounds. A few were social outcasts. You know, we might think of them as heroes, but even after they've been disciples for a long time, like sometimes they still got it wrong, right? Like, you know, like Peter was sometimes still, didn't have great attitudes towards the Gentiles. You know, I love Paul's like so direct. Paul's like, I opposed him to his face because he was wrong, you know. And that's, you know, what the Bible says is like they had it out. And so they had arguments, they had disagreements. They weren't perfect people by any means. But they did have a few positive qualities. They were teachable, they were sincere, and they were hungry. Okay? And so that's what we're talking about. We're talking about FAT, right? Faithful, available, teachable, and that's what they were. You know, they were honest, they were willing to confess their need for understanding. They truly wanted to know and serve God. They had a heart after him. And they were hungry, you know. Their present religious life, you know, at Chi Alpha, where, you know, I've seen, you know, people who don't know Jesus be discipled, for sure, and discipled through conversion and then into following Jesus. But, you know, we've had a lot of students that have come here too that are like, you know, that are religious, or they feel like maybe they know God, and maybe they are even Christians, but they've just been doing like the routine their whole life. And I can't tell you how many people like that have come into discipleship and said like it's changed their whole life because they realize that this is all of life. This is not just part of it. This isn't just about going to church once a week and then, you know, God's not just like a part of the equation. For those of you guys that went to SALT, remember Savo was talking about how it doesn't matter if you give God just like the biggest, he said the biggest, baddest slice of pie, right? But like he gets the whole thing. And this is what discipleship is all about, and this is where they were. Jesus taught us by his methods that the world can be transformed, but only as individuals of the world are transformed. One of the very first messages I preached at Ignite, if you weren't there, you can go back and listen to it, and it talked about the fact that we're the church, okay? Church doesn't just happen when we come together on a Friday or on a night like this. but the church is where God's people are. And so everywhere you go on this campus, that's where God's church is. And so as your life is individually transformed, you have the opportunity to transform other people's lives and other people's lives. And so if you really, truly want to reach the world for Jesus, if you want to have an eternal impact in whatever you do, then making disciples has to be part of the equation, because it's saying, my life is being transformed, and therefore I'm transforming others' lives. He also showed us that anyone is a candidate to be a discipler. This is what we were talking about earlier. So it's not so much an issue of whether you are able to disciple, but whether you choose to disciple. And this is what this class is all about. This class and the following retreat, it's all about helping you to understand the vision for making disciples, and for you to count the cost, and to hopefully to make the decision that you want to make disciples who make disciples who make disciples. Jesus was strategic in the amount of time that he spent with people.
That's good.
I know I went through that kind of fast. You guys get all the blanks? Now, that's hard maybe for some of you. Some of you guys are maybe extroverts and you want to be around like all the people all the time, Now, for introverts, they're like, yes, just give me 2, I'm good, like that's fine, But the extroverts are like, yes, I want to be around, I had my roommate who was on staff with us last year. She just went to the marketplace, Holly. She always wanted, she was like, man, I just wish that we could all 100 people from Chi Alpha could go out to eat together afterwards. She always, that's how she wants us to all be together. But praise God that we're big enough that we're not at that place. I tell our resource leaders all the time that they're really the pastors. They're pastoring their own Chi Alpha. And so if you're in Katie or Jacob's groups, that's a missional community. You're your own mini Chi Alpha group. Suzanne, Oscar, you're your own mini Chi Alpha group. Lorraine and Marquetta, the grads, you guys are your own little mini Chi Alpha group. And so so I might be trying to steer this big ship, but really they're pastoring those smaller Chi Alpha groups. And that's important because that's really how you can be really known. We all, as people, we have this thing where we want to be known deeply by other people. And you just simply can't deeply know 100 people, and as we continue to grow, 200, 300, whatever God might lead us to, you can't know deeply, all of those people. And that's why, a lot of people go to a lot of churches, and it's those churches might be big, and they go there, and then they go home, and they still feel alone, they still feel lost, because they're not really known by anybody. And we have that, it's innate in us, we want to be genuinely known by others. And so you have the opportunity in these smaller groups to do that. And so Jesus was very strategic in the way that he did this. Okay? And so first we have the multitudes. So in the early part of Jesus' ministry, we see him having fruitful ministry among the crowds of people. He did not turn away from the needs of many. He felt responsible for the overwhelming need. And so this is important, okay? So it's not that you just spend time with your disciples and you're forget the other 40,000 people at Purdue, okay? So the world is important. If there's needs, if there's a way that we can meet a need on this campus, or if there's a way that we can meet a need in this community, it would be awesome for your life group, or your resource group to get together and say, hey, let's go serve. I've seen, I know there was one time where there was some grad students that people were reaching out to, and they were really stressed. They had, whatever things that grad students have coming up, the test and different things, and didn't feel like they could get out of their office for lunch. And so some of our grads went over and served them and brought snacks to them or lunch to them, and that's just a really awesome way. I was challenging our resource. This was before I came to Purdue, but I'd heard about it and I was like, that's so cool. So I was challenging our resource leaders. I was like, get creative with the way you reach out to people. So something that they would do is they would make cookies, and they would go to the residence halls, and they would where they lived, and they would knock on somebody's door in their hallway, and they would say, hey, I made these cookies, and so I was wondering if I could give you these cookies, and then I was also wondering if you had any trash that I could take out and throw away from you. And people were like, yeah, that's super weird, but here's the trash, and they took the cookies. And then they would use that as a way to share the gospel. That Jesus takes our sin and gives us good things. And so it was an instant immediate, and also serving a need, because who doesn't love cookies? So cookies for trash. So there you go, something an idea you can run with. So we do need to respond to the needs of the world. But that's not, but as we start to get down in lower numbers, you're going to see that the time that Jesus spent with them was more specific. So the 500, Paul tells us that Jesus, after his resurrection, appeared to 500 people. Surely these must have been followers of the Lord. Something significant here is that the Lord of the universe had ministered for over 3 years among the same nation of people, was killed and rose from the dead. After this, he could only raise a crowd of 500. Okay? And this was Jesus. It does not appear to be a powerful world-shaking movement, does it? Yet Jesus felt confident that he had finished all that he was sent to do. He left behind a small core of trained individuals to continue his mission to reach the world through discipleship. So this might be descriptive. It says relating to our local church, or you could even say in this case, like our local Chi Alpha group, okay? So the 500, it's like, yeah, these are people that know Jesus probably. Most people who come to Ignite, maybe have a relationship with Jesus. And so the 500 would be like the general body. 120, just after the ascension, Luke records that there were at least 120 people who were willing to follow Jesus' wishes to go to Jerusalem and pray. The 70, in Luke 10, it's recorded that Jesus sent out 70 disciples. In what capacity they were disciples is not explained, neither what level or relationship of how they were trained. This is probably the maximum number of relationships we can maintain at any one given time in our lives. And if you think about it, all of our missional communities they're all under 70 people, okay? So if you look at like who came to your Super Bowl party, there were probably believers who came to your Super Bowl party. There were probably unbelievers who came to your Super Bowl party. But like that's your community right there, like believers and unbelievers. Now there might have been some people who couldn't make it, but I know last year, like at my missional community, we did a Christmas party. There were 50 people there, and at our Super Bowl party, there were 50 people there. And so I look at the 70 as like, for me, it was those 50 people. So it was like those of us who knew Jesus, who were making disciples, but then all the people that we were reaching out to. And so that's about, again, you can't, even the number of people in Chi Alpha, like you can't have like a relationship with all of them, because we have over 70 who come to Ignite. But those people who came to your Super Bowl party, like those would be the ones that you say, okay, this is my community, like this is who I'm on mission with, and this is who I'm on mission like towards. And then the 12, these men were with Jesus from almost the beginning of his ministry. They were with him, heard him, prayed with him, and he loved them and trained them. They knew each other very well. So this represents the maximum number of in-depth relationships that we can keep concurrent. This represents our small group, okay? And I don't think any of your small groups are probably 12 like your life groups, but I would say this is more like our resource team. And so most of our resource teams usually end up being between like 4 and 6 people. The resource leader and the people that they're discipling. And so they're, and all of our life group leaders, they join our resource team. And I talked to you last week about how they meet on Sunday nights. They're meeting right now to live out Acts 2:42, which means that they're learning from their resource leaders. They're learning from teaching. They are they're sometimes eating together. They're fellowshipping together. They're praying together. And so those are the really in-depth relationships, and those are the people that they know each other really well. And then you have the 3. From within the 12 were the 3. They experienced things that the rest of the 12 did not. John was called a beloved disciple. And so these seem to be the most of the important and significant relationships in Jesus' life. And so Jesus had 12. He had his small group, but then within the 12, he had the 3 that he really focused on, okay? And so even our life group leaders, if you're in discipleship, your discipler might be discipling you and one other person together in a group, but you're not the only people in the life group, right? Like your discipler has all these other people in the life group, and so it's the same thing. So everybody's welcome to be in a life group. Everybody's welcome, because not everybody's ready for discipleship. And so some people are just like, I'm just coming in, I'm learning, and then, all the time we're adding people into discipleship. And so, Sam was just telling me, like, there's a new girl that's like, I want to be in discipleship. And so all the time we're adding new people in that are ready to be discipled. So does this make sense? Before I move on, you guys get what I'm saying here? So Jesus, yes, he preached to the multitudes, and he fed them, and he ministered to them. but the multitudes were not where he spent most of his time. In fact, a lot of times the multitudes were like chasing him down and he was like going in the other direction. Who he spent most of his time with were his disciples, and specifically the three. He says he would withdraw with them, he would pray with them, he would teach them. And so that's what it is that, you know, it's like, and so again, we've you know, we've been lied to and thinking that like, man, if I want to change the world for Jesus, like I have to reach all these people. But like, discipleship is a slow process, but it's a process that's worth it. And it's a process that if you'll stick with it, that I promise you will change the world. One must decide. Actually, I think I might have that first one. Yeah, I'm going to go here first. One must decide where he wants his ministry to count, and the momentary applause of popular recognition, or in the reproduction of his life and a few chosen individuals who will carry on his work after he's gone. Really, it is a question of which generation we are serving. Okay? And that's why I told you last week that discipleship is fruit that grows on other people's trees. You are not the product of your life group leader. You are the product of your life group leaders, all the way back. The picture I showed last week, those 4 people that came and planted at Purdue, you're the result of their hard work. And after, you know, a year of making disciples, they had like 10, right? Like, so, you know, they go somewhere, you know, we have this Chi Alpha at Purdue, how many people you have? We have 10. You know, you might start a life group next year, you might have 3 people in it. Like, how is that making a difference? But you might have one of those 3 that is really faithful, really available, really teachable, and is like, I'm in, and you reproduce your life into them, and the next one, and the next one, and you come down, you know. I saw a picture one time, we were at a conference, and it was like 8 guys from Sam Houston Chi Alpha, and like, other than the guy right beside them, like, they didn't know any of the other guys, but it was like, this guy discipled, this guy who discipled, this guy who discipled, and it was amazing to see that genealogy, to see that family tree. Just to give you an idea, I hope you're all on here. It's probably small, so you probably can't see if you are anyway. But this is our discipleship tree here at Purdue. Okay? So I'm right here in the blue. Okay? Green is Ivy Tech. Praise God, this is the first year we've ever had full-time staff at Ivy Tech. That's really exciting. We've never had that before. When I came, my first year here, I was working at Purdue and Ivy Tech. I took 3 students total to fall breakaway from Ivy Tech, 3. And now we have 2 full-time people working at Ivy. Like, we have more, like almost as many full-time people working at Ivy Tech as we had like total students at that time. And so, but you know what? It doesn't matter if it's a 2-year school, 4-year school. Discipleship works. Somebody started a Facebook group recently for community college, for Chi Alphas who work at missionaries who work at community colleges. And they were saying, you know, we're trying to find a time to have a weekly service, and what works for you guys. And I posted on there and I said, don't forget like what Chi Alpha is all about. Like, we're here to make disciples. And that's more important. If I was to go plant a Chi Alpha, I would start with discipleship before I start with the weekly service. And a lot of times we do that backwards, right? We want to buy a building, or we want to have some kind of, you know, and we want to do that. Now that can be important eventually, but like starting making disciples is the most important thing. Okay, this red group right here, maroon group, whatever, these are all of our grad students. Okay, so we got Naomi, we got Ebony. Your name's spelled wrong on here, but I fixed it. It's with an I. Marquetta told me, so sorry about that. But so you guys are all over here, right? Yeah, this is the old one. So I updated it. Hannah, you're on here too. You're not on this one, but you're on the updated one. And so those are the grad students. Okay, up here, the navy blue. These are all our undergrad men. Yeah, okay, so 2 of you are excited. So that's really good. So these are our undergrad men, and this is important because we have far more women than men. It's just where we happen to be right now, and so we're really excited about you Chi Alpha men. No pressure, but we hope that you guys are really going to reproduce and make disciples who make disciples who make disciples, because we want to see that grow too. And then here in the yellow, we have all of our undergrad women. Okay. And so this is exciting. And so we've never done this before, but I really want to do this year, because at the end of the year, I want to say, like, have a screenshot, like, here's ours, and then every year, like, just like we see the pictures grow, I want to see this grow and change. And so, so this is exciting. And I would just encourage you right now, like, to not let the chain stop with you, right? Because after your name, there's nobody there right now, right? And that's fine. Like you're exactly where we want you to be. Like you're making this, like you're being discipled, you're being poured into, you're learning, you're growing, but don't let the chain stop with you. Commit right now, like I'm gonna continue to do this next year and the year after, yes.
How would you say discipleship looks like after you graduate when there's not like a book?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we will, don't worry, we will give you tools to do that. So something that we do every year is we call, actually we do it every semester, it's called the graduation dessert. And so we do one in the fall and we do one in the spring for anybody who's going to graduate that year. And then we answer questions just like that. And then we have this curriculum that's 4 weeks long. It's called Springboard, and it's all about how to make disciples in the marketplace. And when possible, I try to bring people back, like students who have been in the marketplace, or either in person or on FaceTime, who will do that. And you're right. You don't have to have a book to make disciples. You can make disciples without a book, and probably in the marketplace, depending on where you go. Like, I mean, the book that we use, we get it on Amazon. Like, you could use that book if you wanted to. And we wouldn't even have to necessarily use a book here. But what we found is we want what we do with discipleship to be. We want it to be able to be easily replicated. And so by the time you graduate, like you'll be experienced enough making disciples. Like I could sit down. Like I've been in ministry long enough. Like I could sit down and have a conversation with my disciples, and like be able to steer the conversation myself. Like, how's your week going? And like, you know, what about this or what about that? But to ask students to do that who've never done that before, like that's a scary thing. It's like you get the deer in the headlights look like, well, I don't know how to do that. And so that's why we want to provide the book. Not because the book is the only way to make disciples, it's just a tool, but it's a helpful tool because if it's like you don't know where to go in the conversation, you're like, oh, right here, this is what I do. So so that's a short answer, but don't worry, by the time you graduate, you'll be super trained. But consider the Kyle internship after you graduate. So, and then you'll learn all kinds of even things more. You guys are going to hear me say that we have 6 women, I think I told you guys this on Friday, 6 women who have applied, I don't know if they're going to all come, but 6 women who have applied to do the internship here next year. We need men, okay? So some of you men, I'm praying you in right now, okay? You guys said, I'm struggling with my, putting my career, my ambitions to God. I'm praying you in to come and to do the internship. We have 2 guys doing the internship this year, which is really exciting, Zach and Jacob. But we don't have any men yet. But so if you know any men who are graduating, say, hey, stick around for a year, do the internship. But I love this, and I love that, imagine if those 12 guys, imagine if they had said, this is going to, what if they had stopped with them? What if they had just said, wow, it was really great being poured into, and then I'm just going to not do anything with this? We wouldn't be here today, right? And so I encourage you to not let it stop with you. So discipleship is life on life. It's actually 3 things. I'm only going to talk about life on life right now. If you want to write it down, you can. We always say discipleship is 3 things. It's life on life, it's life together, and it's life on mission. Discipleship has to be those 3 things. And this is why, it's, I'll be honest, it can be really hard to answer Juliet's question, it can be really hard to make disciples in the marketplace because you're spread out all over the place. One person lives on this part of town, one person lives on this part of town. Making disciples while you're in college is some of the easiest time in your life to make disciples, because you're living in the same space that your disciples are living in. The same residence hall, the same apartment building. You're going to the same classes. You're eating in the same, so we say it's life together. And so one of the things that we talk about and that we will train you guys in the future is something called rhythms. And so we encourage our life groups, we encourage our resource teams to do the rhythms of life together. And so, I know that a lot of you guys said last week, well, I'm concerned about the time. The idea is that discipleship should not take a ton of extra time. Now, you'll have a discipleship meeting, that's one meeting that's extra time, but most of what you do as a discipler should not take extra time. So even if you were not going through the LTC, even if you had no desire to make disciples, what is something that you would be doing next year as a college student anyway? What? Studying, okay? Anybody plan to study next year, right? Even if you're, what if you took your disciples and you studied together? Anybody go to a study table this year with other people in your, what an awesome way to spend time with your disciples, okay? Because they have to study, you have to study. Why not do it together? It's not extra time. You're just doing it together because during that study break, you can study by yourself, but during that study break, you've been studying for a couple hours, you're like, man, we need a break or whatever, and you're talking about your week and you're having this discussion. What's something else that you would do next year, even if you weren't going to make disciples?
Eat a meal.
Eat together.
Eat! Anybody plan to eat 80 meals next year? Maybe 1 or 2, okay? Probably 21 meals a week. Some of you maybe a few more, right? Okay? So what if you took 1 or 2 meals of those 21 meals a week and you ate intentionally with your disciples? Okay? So Sundays after church, that was always a great time for my resource team last year, my missional community. And so we would all eat together. We would go to Earhart or somewhere. Some of you guys have maybe still do that from what we did last year. So that's something that we did. We're like, we have to eat lunch anyway. Why not eat lunch together? Why not spend this time together over a meal? Jesus, you know how many meals that Jesus ate with people? It's a great way to get to know people over a meal, to build relationships. Something else that you might do next year?
Go to the gym.
Go to the gym. You might want to work out, okay? Could you not invite your disciples and really it can be any kind of activity. So I love sports, personally, and so last year when we were setting up things at the beginning of the year, one of the things that we did was we decided we wanted to play volleyball one night. And it happened to be on a Sunday night. It was the very first weekend of the school year last year, and it was so much fun. We had so much fun playing volleyball. And I looked at my co-resource leader, his name was Danny, he's not here anymore, he graduated, went to the marketplace, but I looked at Danny and I said, Danny, we should do this every Sunday night. Now part of that was selfish because Monday's my day off, and so I thought I could do this really late on Sunday and not be exhausted, but he was like, yes, we should. And so we started doing volleyball every Sunday night, and it grew from having 1 court to 2 courts, to by the end of the year we had 3 courts of people playing volleyball in our community and people that we were reaching out to. And I believe, well I know because I went last week, but you guys still play volleyball on Sunday nights. And that started at the very beginning of last year because it was a rhythm, it was something I wanted to do anyway. I didn't feel like extra time, I already want to play volleyball. I wanted to play softball. Well, so I got our teams together. I wanted to play volleyball, and so we competed. We were reaching out to so me and one of my disciples, Jocelyn, we were reaching out to this girl from the basketball team. Her name is Keys. She graduated as well last year, and so we were reaching out to this girl, and so she's athletic and she likes to play volleyball. So me and Jocelyn and Keys, and we got one other girl, I don't remember who now, and we said, hey, let's play volleyball together in the rec league. And so one night a week we went out and we played volleyball, and it was just a way to share life together and to hang out with my disciple, and also to reach out to this person together. Because remember, it's life on life, it's life together, and it's life on mission. So Jesus chose followers who could bear witness to his life and ministry and carry on after he returned to the Father. He didn't teach in a classroom. The world was his classroom, and discipleship happened in the everyday stuff of life. There's a really great book. I know I've recommended a lot of books, and I know you probably aren't going to read all of them, but maybe read one this semester, read one in the summer, or something like that. There's a really great book called Saturate. By the way, leaders are readers. Remember that? It's Saturate. It's by Jeff Vanderstelt. And it's about saturating the world with Jesus. And he has this phrase, the everyday stuff of life, okay? And the everyday stuff of life is like the eating and the studying and the working out and all these things you guys are talking about. So it's like whatever that some of you guys might be like, man, I love to play video games, right? Well, rather than do it by yourself, it's like, hey, let's invite my disciples in. Or some of you you might think, well, it'd be really fun to go to Chicago this weekend. Why not invite your disciples? So it's just about being intentional with the time that you already have. And so Jesus didn't just teach in a classroom. Now we do have a weekly, you do have a weekly time that you meet with your disciples, but discipleship happens all the time. I used to always say as a youth pastor, my favorite teaching times never happened during my sermons. They always happened on trips. I'd be in the van ride with a student, and everyone else is sleeping, and I have this one student that's riding shotgun, and we just start talking about life, and there's God just provides this teaching moment, or I this is my favorite games to play as a youth pastor is we'd be riding along and I would see something and I would tell them they'd have to make a sermon out of it, okay? And so we'd be going along and I said, okay, you see that paper plate right there? Make a sermon, like see that fire hydrant? Like make a, and so they'd have to like preach me a 60-second sermon based on that illustration. So stuff like that was really fun. I think I shared this one time at an Ignite, but Marlou, one of the staff people that I told you about last week that I led her to Jesus. Shortly after she became a Christian, I went to go visit her. She was up going to school at Chicago at the time. And this is still to this day one of the funniest stories. I love this story so much. But we took a walk in the park together. And so we're walking in the park, whatever. And the wind is blowing through the trees. And every time the wind blows through the trees and it has that like, that sound that trees make, and it sounds like applause. And I always think about the verse that talks about like the trees, like in the fields, like they clap their hands, and I always think about like the Bible talking about like the rocks will cry out because like everything has sound waves, right? So like everything worships God. And so I was like, so I hear that, so I was already thinking, and so I just told her like, oh yeah, this like whenever I hear that I think about this, and she's like brand new baby Christian, like probably less than a month like knowing Jesus. So she looks at me really skeptically. She points to this grass that we're walking by, and she said, you mean that blade of grass knows who Jesus is? And I said, that's right, that blade of grass knows who Jesus is. And it was just like this awesome teaching moment. And it didn't happen in a classroom, it didn't happen in discipleship. And this is what Jesus did all the time. Jesus is walking by and he sees this fig tree doesn't have any figs and he curses it, right? And then the disciples, Peter, I think it's Peter, right? That's like, wait, you cursed that? And Jesus is like, you think that's big? You just wait, because, if you stand believing that you've received it, like, you stand praying believing that you've received it, like, it'll be yours. In fact, you could say to this mountain, be moved into the sea. And they're like, whoa, like, there's 5,000 people plus women, men plus women and children who are hungry, and they're like, what are we going to do? And Jesus is like, I don't know. Like, what do you think? You feed them. And Andrew, one of the guys, I forget who was like counting up and like, well, it would take this many days' wages. And Andrew's like, well, we got this little boy that has like 2 fish sandwiches. I don't know if that can do anything, right? And Jesus is like, let me show you something. And he goes and he takes the bread and he blesses it and he begins to hand it out. And there's 12 basketfuls left over. Okay? Jesus lived life with them. He didn't just teach in the classroom. They were walking by, somebody that needed to be healed. And Jesus says, you know what? You can have, the power of God lives in you to heal this person. He teaches them, he sees, he points out something, or they point out something to him, and he uses it as an object lesson to teach them. Instead of filling stadiums and seeking crowds, Jesus invested in the 12, and especially in the 3, as we talked about earlier, Peter, James, and John. And this is what it's all about right here. This is what it's all about. The number of people that we have making disciples, that's how big our Chi Alpha is, in my opinion. Right now, we have 28 people making disciples. 28. Now that's good. At one point, all of Purdue Chi Alpha wasn't 28 people. So praise God for that, right? 28 disciple makers. But you know what's interesting to me? We have 28 people going through this discipleship, or through this LTC class, learning how to make disciples. In 1 year, we could double the amount of people making disciples. Isn't that amazing? In 1 year, we could double the army on this campus to reach those who don't know Jesus. That's amazing. Now, I didn't include the staff in that. There's staff that are making disciples too, and I figured it balanced out because I didn't count the staff because we are always here. And then we graduate some seniors, so I figured it would balance out. But roughly, we could increase our army. We could double our army because we're not just looking for addition. We're not just looking for more people to join our group. We're looking to make disciples, and we're looking to multiply. And that's the challenge, is will you be part of this multiplication process of making disciples who make disciples who make disciples? And so when people ask me how big our Chi Alpha is, I know that they're looking, they want to know how many come to our main meeting. And so I'll usually tell them, we have, depends on the week, anywhere from 80 to 100, begin the year, you have like 120 that come to our main meeting. And that's great, I praise God for every single one of them. But we have 28 students who are on mission who are making disciples, who make disciples, who make disciples until Jesus returns. And they're on mission, and like, to me, like, that's the heart of Chi Alpha. And my prayer is that every single one of you would join that call, would join that high call of making disciples, and that next year, I'm going to be able to look at a class, because if we go from 28 to 56 people who are making disciples, and each of you just makes just one disciple, that next year I'm going to be able to look at a class of 56 people. Do you see how quickly that increases? And I'm going to be able to look at 56 people and say, you know what, in 1 year we could double what we're doing in 1 year. And the year after that, I'm going to be, I'll send them up to math I can't do in my head. What is that, 102?
112.
112? 112, I told you I'm not good at math. 100, I'd be able to look at an LTC class of 112 people. In just 2 years, we could have more people making disciples than we currently have coming to Ignite. I mean, I don't know if you're all excited. I'm excited. Like, I hope you guys are with me. Like, this is why I'm here. Like, this is why God called me here. This is why I, sold my house and most of what I owned, and I moved here to Indiana, to a place where I didn't know anybody, because Jesus called me here to make disciples who make disciples who make disciples, so that this university would know the name of Jesus. Students from every nation, from every tribe, from every language, 130 countries represented here at this. And imagine if every single one of them, this is when I tell my supporters, when I go through my support presentation, I tell them, does anybody know how many, off the top of their head, does anybody know how many Chinese students are on this campus?
400.
Huh?
400.
More than that.
2,000.
How many?
2,000.
More than 2,000. Okay, it's been 4,000 the last few years. It's a little under that. It's 3,000 and something this year. Can you imagine? I am probably, short of a miracle, I am probably never in my life going to be able to speak Chinese. Okay? But can you imagine 3,000 to 4,000 Chinese students that would get discipled here on this campus and would go back to their country, and they know the language, and they know the culture, that could make a difference there? We have 1,000 students from India. Got a couple in the LTC class from India, praise God for that, right? 1,000 students from India, if they could get discipled here, and they could understand it, and they could go back to their city, and they could make a difference. This is a limited time to reach students, but what we have the opportunity to do is we literally have, it's not hyperbole to say we have the opportunity to change the world, and not every place is like that. Not every place has 9,000 international students and 40,000 students total. I personally have discipled students who have ended up in California and DC and Texas and Indianapolis and other places that I can't remember at this moment, but have literally ended up around the world. Like, what a blessing that is to be able to do that. I think that's my last slide. Oh yeah. Any questions before we close? Yeah.
What was the first book you mentioned to read?
Wiki-Church. Yeah, I can't remember the name of the author, but both Wiki-Church and Saturate are in our office. Saturate, you can't miss it. It's bright orange and it blinds you when you look at it. I don't know. It's like a terrible design. It's got blue circles on it, but it's a lot. You have to wear sunglasses when you look at the cover. So, yeah.
Is there a full list of all the books you guys have on the list?
There is. There is. I will have, you're all on alerts now, right? Yeah, I'll have to shoot an alert so you're in there. But I will have, Kara has it, so I'll have her post in alerts, the list of books. So yeah, you can check out the list before you even come in there. And all you have to do is write your name. We have a piece of paper, so you just write your name, the book you're checking out. And there's books on every topic. I mean, if you want like books on there's books on reading the Bible, there's books on prayer, there's books on, if you struggle with any kind of sexual issues, like pornography, whatever, there's books on that, there's books on emotional healing. I mean, you name it, it's down there, so. Any other questions? All right, so the last thing is just the attendance sheet. So, and I think I got I'll have to check. I think I was trying to do it as people came in, and hopefully I didn't miss anybody. But, so this was, obviously I was not clear on this, so I want to be really clear on this. So you can miss, so there's 11 things that we say, 11 options of things, 7 ignites, and 4 LTCs. You only have to come to 10. If you come to 10 of the 11, because the 11 is kind of like a bonus one because of the weird stuff that happened, but if you come to 10, you get the retreat free. You come to all but 1, you get $15 off. You're allowed to miss 3 total, or in this case 4, because of that extra Ignite, if that makes sense. So that doesn't, you can't replace an Ignite for an LTC, but anyway, I explained all that last week. However, if you do miss an Ignite or an LTC, even though you're still like, you can still be a leader, you still have to make that up, okay? So I did not get papers from most of you, which tells me that that was probably on me, that I was not clear on that, okay? Now I did get from some of you. So you're always supposed to do it by that next, so if you miss it, so if you miss an Ignite on Friday, then not within 2 days, but within like, it's always due a week later, okay? So if you miss it on a Friday, then by that next Friday, or if you miss an LTC, by that next like LTC. Does that make sense? If you miss one, okay, question?
So I think that part makes sense. I think for me, I was more on the bonus one, because you know for classes, if they say a bonus, that means that you don't have to do.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so for the bonus, does that not count for the assignments too? That means you still have to.
Correct, and that's where I think I did not explain that well, and so thank you for saying that. And so, yes, and the reason why is because one of the bonus ones that you miss, like we intentionally pick the topics like that we pick because we want you guys to know all these topics. So it counts as far as like you won't have to pay for your retreat, but I still want, it's only a 1-page paper, okay? Like, you could probably make it up and I wouldn't even know if I, to be honest, but I hope you don't do that. But like, these are really important topics. And so like forgiveness, like we talked about forgiveness because like we want our leaders to understand this. We talked about, we talked about purity because like that's a really important topic last week. Man, if you miss indiscriminate love, like you gotta listen. I mean, leader or not, you gotta listen to what Shalise talked about because it was awesome, And so we want you guys to still make those up. Now, I'm willing to work with you, okay? If there's some, if you have like 2 or 3 to make up or whatever and you need like an extra week or whatever, just communicate with me. That's all I ask, And so again, I understand that was my fault. I do have this list up here. And so what I did was I have, it's okay. So I have the list of attendance, and so maybe you don't even know off the top of your head which one you missed, so you can feel free to check it. And so if you were there, I put an X, and if you were not there, then I just wrote the word absent. If it's in red, it means I still need an assignment from you, and if it's green, it means you have given me your assignment, okay? So some of you guys that gave me your assignments, like maybe for that reason, like you missed 2 and you only gave me 1, so you can check this. If for some reason this is wrong, like you didn't think that like from now on, you guys know you need to like write on the clipboard, but maybe you didn't realize that or something. Just talk to me, like we can figure it out. But this is there, so make sure that you, that information is correct. And then go to Ignite this week, take notes, and then I will post the homework for next week. It'll just be more pages in the PDF. Yes?
For like going back and making those up, could you possibly like put the link for the podcast in like the folder or something? Yeah.
Yeah. You can go back and you can look at the group meeting. Like there's not been that much stuff posted in there. So the podcast is just on our podcast page, but our folder has everything else. So our folder has for any LTCs you miss. So this video. So our staff's day off is Monday, and so that's why usually like Tuesday we try to get this to you if you missed an LTC. So the PowerPoint, like I'll put the PowerPoint in there tonight from this, and the LTC, like that video is already in there. But the podcasts, like they're just on the podcast page, and I did put that link in the group, and I can post it again. So I thought about like moving those podcasts over, but I was like I'd have to download it and re-upload it, and I was like, you know what? You guys are trying to be leaders and you're college students, so I'm pretty sure you can probably all go to the Purdue Chi Alpha page and get there. So I have that confidence in you. Yes.
I emailed it to Axel from email.com.
Okay, so that would be why I didn't get it. So could you just resend it to me whenever you have a chance? So my email is in there.
Oh, okay.
Is in the thing. So thank you. Yeah, if you just go back up and you just read, and again, if there's anything in there that's not clear, but even if you were added to the GroupMe later, you can still go back and I mean, it's like I said, it's not that much. So all these, like the very first stuff is all the instructions. So I have all the ignites that you need there. I have it's xapurdue.com/podcast. I have the requirements, the schedule, all of that. And so if you guys can all get that to me by next Sunday, anything that you missed, I'd appreciate it. If you need you know, an extension or something, just talk to me and we'll work that out. So.